Greetings. Okay, so apologies that this was not here earlier. I am sorry. This overview is going to be on Chapter 3. I'm going to spend about 15 minutes or so talking about Chapter 3, and then I will do another video on Chapter 4, and we'll see how that goes. Okay, so I'm sure all of you have read Chapter 3, but because you are going to have a midterm exam, it's a good idea to go back over some things. Okay, one of the key principles in Chapter 3 is, obviously, we're talking about personality, and your reading in Chapter 3 really points to the truth that personality develops. Some people might think that you are born with a personality. You might be born with certain characteristics, but honestly, a personality develops. So while we're born with certain instinctual urges, we are not born with the innate capability of interacting with other human beings in a positive, productive manner. Our ability to interact with other humans is something that develops by our interactions with other humans. So we aren't born understanding the concept of empathy or how to be empathetic. That is something that we learn in earliest childhood. We actually aren't even really born, we aren't born knowing how to love and give love. We learn that as young children. That's one of the reasons why it's so important that children have secure attachments, because it is in that secure attachment, in that nurturing early environment, that we learn how to love and be loved, to share love and give love. As we look at developing personality and developing these abilities, we can see that we are influenced by a multitude of different factors. At the very core, and the first and most important frame of influence is the family. The family's influence on the child, growth and development, personality development, can last a lifetime. If we're fortunate, we grow up in a family that tells us how to love and give love, that's nurturing, that's safe, that provides all those initial factors that we need to grow into a healthy adult. School is another really important factor that molds and shapes our growth and development. And then finally, we can't forget the influence of peer groups, which again are critically important in the growth and development of our young children. And finally, today we have to realize the impact that mass media has on the growth and development of young children, including personality development. And finally, in Chapter 3, we talk about what is known as the graying of the nation. And what that means in a nutshell is that our population is rapidly aging. We are okay, so the fertility rate of Anglo-Americans is not high. In other words, Anglo-Americans are not having enough children to keep that part of the population growing. We also know that the more mature a population is, the less children the women tend to have. And that does not mean that from a physiological point of view that their fertility is decreasing. It means that as a society matures, becomes wealthier, women tend to be more educated. They tend to enter the workforce in jobs that usually are very integral to the support of the family. They tend to engage in more career type opportunities. All of that means that women tend to have more choices. Some of the choices that women tend to make in these situations is to have fewer children. Much of our experience in society is organized by age groups. So in other words, we have childhood, adolescent, adulthood, and then finally old age. We have experienced a demographic shift in that the majority population in the United States is entering into that old age category. the graying of the nation does have many ramifications for our society as a whole. Number one, it takes people out of the workforce as more people are entering the retirement years. It puts a greater burden onto the Social Security system as more monies are paid out as people enter those old age years. It also means that there will be more need for people in the healthcare industry who are caretakers of elderly people. Another really real factor of this is that as people enter the old age time of their life, their work changes. They are more than likely not contributing as much to taxes, as much to Social Security. Instead, they're taking money out of those systems. With less young people in the workforce, that puts strain on many of those systems. So in a nutshell, Chapter 3 really looks at the integral contribution of social experience, be it family, peer groups, the neighborhood you grow up in, your school, your workplace, whatever it might be, how that contributes to the overall development of human personality. So through research that's been done over the years, researchers have come to understand that it takes social experience to develop personality. Harlow conducted research on rhesus monkeys that looked at the effects of a monkey when a young baby monkey is taken away from its parent and given like a stuffed doll to cuddle with and to love, and what happens to the growth and development of that monkey. Through Harlow's work, he came to conclude that monkeys they do not thrive unless they have contact with another monkey, a nurturing mother monkey, that the substitute of a stuffed monkey does not make up for the love and closeness that the baby monkey needs to thrive. This is something that we can see many parallels to with humans. We know that if a human baby is not given love and affection, they also will not thrive, and in many cases their personalities will not develop. There have been some really horrific stories of children that have grown up, say, in orphanages in Eastern Europe or Russia, that are very overcrowded, and these children do not have the benefit of having someone to hold them, to rock them, to love them. And so these children grow up without knowing that human contact and are never taught empathy, affection, love. Sometimes the kids are okay. Many times the kids grow up and have significant personality issues. One of the issues that can develop with these kids is something called RAD, Reaction Attachment Disorder. And what that means is that these kiddos don't know how to attach. They literally don't know how to love someone else, and they are very susceptible to becoming sociopaths. What research also tells us is that with both animals and certainly with humans, that there is a point in the growth and development of a young person where if they have not had any socialization or interactions to socialization, that you almost reach a point after which it's hard to return. Not only does personality develop in a very young child early, but intelligence does as well. The brain needs interactions to develop. The brain, our human brains, will not just grow to full capacity. They need stimulation, they need food and nutrition, and without that, they do not grow and develop. A really interesting case with this, if you get a chance, is Jeannie the Wild Child. It was a documentary that was made, I think, back in maybe the 90s. But it's about a young girl that was raised in a very abusive situation and was basically kept locked in a room. She was never allowed to play or run or do all the things that kids do. She was oftentimes either locked in a crib or locked on strapped down on a potty chair, never allowed to do anything. She was beaten if she made noise. She didn't learn how to speak. Just incredibly stunted socio-emotional growth and development, and physical as well, because she was never allowed to move. So physically, she was very weak and underdeveloped. She was finally found when she was 12 years old by a social worker. And the documentary kind of goes through her life after that, and the researchers trying to work with her and help her gain back the skills she never learned. And it's a really poignant story, and I recommend it to you. You can get it on YouTube. You can Google it. It was a Nova documentary, I believe. A very sad story, but very interesting. And what the researchers concluded with their work on Jeannie was that they really couldn't come to a definitive conclusion as to whether her mental capacity was due to completely a lack of stimulation, or if she actually was cognitively impaired before she was put in her situation. So she did learn some language. She never was able to talk fluently, and she never really was able to live outside of a supportive home environment, sort of like a halfway house. Anyway, very sad but interesting story. A researcher by the name of Erik Erikson, his work supported the assumption that personality develops not only by what happens to you as a young child, but what happens to you over the course of your lifespan. When we talk about stages of life, we're not only referring to those stages that are marked by particular biological changes, but we're really talking about stages that are marked and delineated by society. So in other words, society determines what those different stages of life are, and that can vary from culture to culture. So for instance, in some cultures, the age of maturity comes quite a bit younger than it does in our culture. In some cultures, when kids are 11 or 12 years old, they're taking on adult responsibilities and are viewed as adults. In our culture, we tend to really not view children as adults until they turn 18. So while we cannot get away from the truth that biology does significantly determine the stages of life that we go through, it is also true to say that society has a significant influence about how we feel about the stages that we're going through. So as I mentioned earlier, the family is the single most important and significant agent of socialization that we experience in our lives. But what we also know is that the look of family is changing. Today we have more single-parent households. We have more blended families. There are different dynamics that are impacting how we view and even understand the concept of family. A very sad but significant fact is also the number of single-parent homes that have one parent incarcerated and or have a non-custodial parent that is seldom to never involved in a child's life. With the ever-changing nature of what is family, it is increasingly, or it is always needful that a child has a caring adult in their life, someone that will support them, nurture them, love them, consistently be there for them. That may be a biological parent, it may be a biological relative, or it may be someone completely unrelated to the child. It matters less where that person comes from and more that that person is present in the life of the child. So up through early adolescence, I would say 13, 14, 15, parents or the parent figure is really the most important and significant person in the child's life. After that age, then it really becomes the peer group and the social influence. Well, I am coming up on the end of my 15 minutes here, so I'm going to have to close down for this portion of Chapter 3, and I will post another video. Thanks so much.